also in this fascinating organ that is the brain. Okay? So what we are feeling these days in this really nice event here with Yevo, you know, the vibe and the emotions and how excited we are, all happening because, you know, there's some firing going on up in the brain that excites us. So I'm really excited to be here. Actually, I wish that scientific conferences were as fun as this one. But let's talk a little bit about some facts about the brain. So why all that happened? The brain is a fascinating structure that is extremely complex. And you can see that it's a big machine that actually is made of huge amount of units or cells that we call neurons. And we have, just on the surface of the brain, around 20 billion neurons. Just on the surface, something that we call the cortex, that is part of the gray matter, which is right at the, on the surface of the brain. And you can also look at other facts, other numbers. So we have like around double the number of supporting neurons. So those, supporting cells that actually help those neurons to be healthy. So around 40 billion. And we have actually 100,000 miles of connections and fibers inside the brain. So it's something amazing, like several times, going around the air. So it's pretty much amazing. All that microscopic structure is really densely packed. It's huge, it's huge. And just on the surface, there are around 15 trillion connections. And if you see on the picture on the lower left, the main pathway that connects the two halves of the brain has just on its own 250 million fibers connecting. So that's something huge, So of course, the brain demands a lot of energy, and it pretty much ends up taking around 15 to 20% of the blood flow that goes from the heart. And also, it has some specific requirements, or it's very important that a good nutrition helps the brain. So, to a certain extent, that some of the essential nutrients we've been hearing about are essential because because the body cannot make them, but also they have a very important role in, for instance, like building some structures on the brain that are very unique, or for instance, also making some of the kind of connection chemicals, so the chemicals that actually help connect the neurons better. A massive structure that needs a lot of fuel and resources. But we have learned, the brain has always fascinated us for centuries, right? This is something that us all probably as humankind. But over the past decades, we've been learning more about the brain and what happens with a very astonishing amount of detail. And the reason why we are learning all that is because the availability of new methods that can help us make pictures like those ones that you guys are making to the so we can have very precise pictures inside the brain and see what's going on in terms of the function and how the brain activates in response to a stimulus. So what we have been learning, for instance, is that the brain is changing all the time, and there is a big process of change that happens, when you're in development, from children to adolescents, for instance. And you can see there in those brain maps, these are 3D reconstructions of the brain. You can see these different colors, and you can see what happens in the brain of a kid that is 5 years old as it becomes a 20-year-old. Something similar to what we have seen recently in the very famous movie Boyhood. So what happens in the transition from childhood to adolescence. Actually the brain keeps developing even further on the 20s, to the mid-20s, so it's a very long process. And you can see that also the development of the brain has some, what we call regional specificity. That means that not all the brain develops symmetrically, so there are several areas that take longer to develop, and others that some areas are slower, and some others are faster. And you can see there in the picture that the areas that are depicted in red are the ones that take longer to mature. So the color code in that picture is the more blue a region is, the more mature it is. So you can see that some areas that are located in the anterior part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, what we call, take longer to develop. So they develop slowly. And actually these are the areas that are more complex and more sophisticated, and they support very complex mental functions. Okay, so what happens during brain aging? So after we cross adolescence and adulthood, so then comes aging. And what we've been learning also over the past years is with these brain scans and this possibility of having pictures of the brain and then follow those brains over the years, is that during the process of aging there is a reversal. So we start losing neurons, or the cortical side particularly gets thinner. And this is a very nice study that was done recently in around 1,000 elderly people, at least 65-year-old, who were followed over 4 years. And you can see also in those brain pictures the areas of the brain that get thinner over the years. So those areas in red are the ones that are more vulnerable. And as you can see, it's the reversal. The areas that develop slower, these are the ones that age faster. So we have certain areas in the brain that are very vulnerable to the process of aging. And actually, those areas, if you look at the scale, this represents the percentage of gray matter that people are losing, or we will be losing as we age. So from 65 years old, the rate of gray matter loss over per year, it ranges between 1% to 2%. According to the area. So these areas that are depicted in red are areas that that age faster, and so we have around a 2% loss per year from 65 years and on. So pretty massive stuff. So there is also, as we age, there is an increased risk of degenerative diseases, particularly dementia, and the most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. And here you can see an example of a healthy brain with, depicted in green, compared with Alzheimer's disease brain or dementia brain, which is depicted in red. So you can see that the neurons get the connection of the neurons get disrupted, and there is some garbage that collects around the neurons, and that impacts the function of the neurons in the brains of Alzheimer's disease patients. And also, as you can see there in the picture, the brain of patients with Alzheimer's disease gets shrinked. So there is a pretty massive loss of volume. If you compare it with a healthy brain, there is a huge difference. So if I put it into music, what we want is to have a brain that sounds fast, agile, and something like that. Something like that, very agile, very fast. But as we go old, there's a slowing of the connections, there is an impact of aging, and that affects function, and then we start, getting slower. Or if, it crosses the threshold of becoming a disease, so we started to have like some weird sounds, or so what we want to do is to do everything we can to prevent that process from happening. So what can we do? Let's find solutions. So what we know is that there are certain factors that can be modified and other factors that cannot be modified. So among the non-modifiable factors are age, so the older we get, the more risk of having dementia or Alzheimer's disease, and genetics. So if we have family history, it's going to be more likely that we end up having dementia or faster cognitive decline. But we also have factors that we can still fight on, which is particularly diet. So there is a very strong association with the healthiness of a diet and the likelihood of having an accelerated brain aging. So it's something that we all have to work on. And of course, the availability of essential nutrients is very important, that matter. Also, physical inactivity is another modifiable factor, stress and drug use. So we are very excited, and we are planning to do a study with Yevo to try to study the impact of the brain shake that some of you had the chance or the privilege to try this morning. And so we are going to be studying the impact or the effects of the brain shake, of the Yevo brain shake, on the brain using these very precise pictures of the brain with brain scans, functional MRI, that's what we use. So we are going to use a sample of 60 healthy elderly participants, and we are going to randomize them or allocate them into 2 different groups, and half of them are going to have the active brain shake, and so the Yevo brain shake, and the other half are going to have a control shake. So we're going to be doing an intervention for a total around 1 month, so 4 weeks, and we're going to be using a functional MRI to look at changes in the brain, in the function of the brain, and also as well as performance in cognitive tasks, so tasks or tests that measure mental performance. So to give you an idea of what is the experience of having a brain scan, that perhaps some of you have gone through the experience because of healthy reasons, or you have been exposed, or a relative of yourself. So what we do during a brain scan is we put the subjects or participants or patients on some sort of a moving bed, and then we put it inside a tunnel, and they have some sort of a mirror in the tunnel that actually projects or is connected to a projector, so we are able to present stimuli. Think of them like video games that get projected at the back of the scanner, so the subject is seeing the stimuli as their brain gets imaged, or as we collect pictures of the brain, and we are able to see changes in the brain in response to the stimuli that the subjects or the visual presentation or the video games that are presented to the subject. So you can see that's for instance an example of one subject participating in one of our studies, and out of that we can do analysis and look at different changes in the brain in relationship with the stimuli that are presented. So what are the targets? Where are we looking in these studies? So the targets that we are looking are the most important targets related to cognitive decline and dementia. So there are 2 main cognitive domains that what we call. The first one is episodic memory. So the ability to remember things that happened. Think of that as the recall of personal experiences, or for instance, if I ask you, what did you have or what did you do last night for dinner? So your ability to recall all that engages a circuit in the brain that is depicted in the image, that pretty much is focused around the hippocampus, and also some other connections with the medial prefrontal regions. So we have a very clear idea what is the brain circuit that is supporting episodic memory, and we know that episodic memory is one of the key factors that start to decline as we get old, and also particularly in the case of people who go and develop Alzheimer's disease. So we want to target and study that in detail to evaluate the effects of the Yevo brain shake. We also are interested in another target is executive functions, which are the highest level mental functions. That is also called cognitive control, technically. So this is our ability to adapt behavior to the circumstances or the context, or based on both. Our ability to behave not in a reactive way, but in a proactive way, so that goals guide our behavior. All that is under the umbrella of this domain of executive functions. We can evaluate that with a series of computer tests, or also paper and pencil tests, and also present stimuli in the scanner that engage those circuits, and we can have a look at different changes in brain activity. So we are going to be targeting these 2 domains, episodic memory and executive functions, to evaluate the impact of the Yevo brain shake. And we hope to get started soon, and we hope that we're going to have final results around in 2 years, but probably earlier. So stay tuned, and we'll be able to share. We'll be able to share results as soon as we have. Okay, so thank you very much.